Hey, what's going on? Welcome to today's video. I think this video is going to really serve you well because it's about how to create real change in your life. And I know that there's all kinds of videos on the internet about how to create change in your life. And I know everyone loves like 10 steps to change your life. But unfortunately, real change is nonlinear. There isn't a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 step process that you can follow. You have to learn how to connect to what it is you want and then surrender it over to a higher power. And that requires letting go of outcomes. So that's why seven steps to achieve whatever it is you want doesn't really work in the spiritual growth world. But today I am going to give you one tool that is nonlinear that you can begin applying into your life immediately that is going to create real change in your life. And it's going to be actually relatively effortless. There's no 10-step process that you need to do. You just have to do one thing every single day. And ultimately what that one thing is you need to begin to train your mind. You need to begin to take back the power that the mind has over you. And this is called the observer effect. And this is not something that I created. This is actually a scientist, David Bohm, was back around in the Einstein days. And basically what he learned was they were observing molecules, and I'm really dumbing this down here, but they were observing molecules and they kept on creating different patterns when they were shining them through this filter. They kept on behaving differently and they couldn't understand why they were behaving differently. And this is when David Bohm created this theory of the observer effect, which essentially means what we observe changes. And this has been observed multiple times throughout the history of life, where you see people do experiments like they would have one plant that they talk nice to and one plant that they say they hate all the time. One plant they're saying I love you, one plant they're saying I hate you. The plant that they say I love you to grows big, tall, and strong. The plant that you say I hate you to dies. Okay, so just by changing the energy and changing our focus, we can change our reality. And Joe Dispenza has a quote that says, if you want to change your reality, you need to change your personality. But how do you begin to change your personality? Well, the first step is you need to understand what your current personality is. And in order to do that, we need to start looking at the mind. The big problem that most of us have is that our ego, which is our mind unobserved, has completely taken over the show. It's running the entire bus. It's driving the bus. And without beginning to look at the ego and how it is protecting us, we can never take back the control. You cannot change a problem that you are unaware of. So how do we become aware? We begin to observe. So how do you observe the mind? Well, it's relatively simple. Basically, what you want to do is you want to take a step back outside of the mind and just observe what's going on. And you can do this multiple times. You can do this, you can do it in the shower is a great place where you're not trying to control your thoughts. You're just starting to pay attention to what your mind is telling you constantly. You can do it every time you get into your car. I do this a lot where I keep my radio off and I'm just listening to what my mind has to tell me. The more we can move into this observer mode, we're observing our thoughts, we are going to begin to bring awareness to how our ego is protecting us. And the ego's primary function is to keep us safe. And this is really easy to understand in the physical world. If without the ego, we would be walking in front of buses, we'd be walking off cliffs, we'd be holding our hands on hot stoves, okay? So the ego, though, is also doing this exact same thing in the emotional world. And in the emotional world, the way the ego does this is it keeps us safe with the development of survival patterns. And this is something that Mastin coined the term survival patterns, which is essentially beliefs, patterns, behaviors. And these are the beliefs, patterns, and behaviors that keep us from feeling emotional pain. The problem being is that those patterns are just keeping us safe. And we all know that in order to have any change or growth in our lives, we can't play it safe, right? I remember when I first started sailing, I met this guy that he said, I'm a fair weather sailor, okay? And essentially, from the little knowledge I had of sailing was that I basically came to the realization really quickly that in order to become a great sailor, I would need to put myself into situations that I was uncomfortable in. If I only went out in fair weather, I would never grow as a sailor. So him being a fair weather sailor meant he was stuck in this one lane of only sailing in 7-knot winds, let's say. So I consciously made efforts to go and put myself into higher winds and scared the living hell out of myself. But because of that, I grew as a sailor. I changed as a sailor. Now, with this understanding that the ego wants to keep us safe, we then want to begin to understand how it is keeping us safe. So this is when we begin to bring awareness to the survival patterns. And we do this just by observing what our mind is telling us. So let me give you some examples of how the mind is keeping us safe. One of those ways would be through people pleasing. Okay, this would be a survival pattern. If you're a people pleaser, that survival pattern that the ego has created is just protecting you from feeling some sort of pain. The pain of disappointing others, the fear of conflict, that's what it was for me. The needing of acceptance and wanting everyone to like you. These are the tools that the ego has created. But if you're a people pleaser, that survival pattern keeps you playing small because you keep agreeing with everyone. You never have your own opinion about anything, and you're easily pulled from one place to another because you're just agreeing with people. Another survival pattern would be self-doubt. Self-doubt. So self-doubt, when we begin to observe self-doubt, we begin to hear thoughts like, is this what, am I on the right path? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? We're constantly asking all of our friends and all of our family if they think that this is what we should be doing, right? This self-doubt keeps us playing small, keeps us safe, because the self-doubt prevents us from actually going and doing anything, right? So when we can begin to bring awareness to whatever it is that the ego is using, we just start observing the ego, we observe the mind, we can then say, oh, I see what you're doing here. I see the common theme, which is me constantly questioning every single thing that I'm doing. Or maybe the theme is you're blaming the entire world for all of the things that have gone wrong in your life. I'm recently watching the show Shameless, and I'm like, all of these people are completely in victim mindset, right? They're mad at the man, they're mad at the person that's making all of the money, and they're not doing anything to change their own situation because they're trapped in apathy. That's what the mind keeps telling them to keep them safe so that they can't get out of the south side of Chicago from the show Shameless. So this is how the ego protects us. And the beginning step to breaking free from this is to observe what it is the mind's telling us on a regular basis. So you can do that in multiple scenarios. One is, like I say, you can take moments throughout the day and just start listening to the mind. So when you're in the shower, just start listening. Just take a step back and just observe what's happening in the mind. When you're in a car, listen. I also used, anytime I walk through a doorway, I would take 30 seconds and just take 30 seconds throughout my day and just listen to what my mind has to tell me. But then also, as scenarios begin to play out in our lives, if we have a stressful situation, we can then begin to shine the light of awareness on our thoughts. When we observe our thoughts, they begin to change. Once you see something, you cannot unsee it. So now that we're shining the light of awareness on our thoughts, they begin to change and transform. So another great tool to create any change is something that Dr. David Hawkins talked about, was just to begin to track it. And this is essentially what we're doing in observer mode. We're beginning to track our thoughts. We're beginning to pay attention to what the mind is telling us on a regular basis. And just by paying attention, they change. So this is a great example. He says, if you have an addiction to eating cookies and you want to stop eating so many cookies, the only thing that you need to do to break free from the habit of eating cookies is start tracking how many cookies you eat every single day. Right? So one day you eat 10, one day you eat 20, one day you eat 13. And eventually, though, just by bringing awareness to that pattern, to that addiction, you will begin the process of becoming free of it. So this is the power that comes when we learn how to observe. Just by observing and creating awareness alone, we have already set the wheels in motion to create dramatic transformation in our life. So that is the challenge, and this is what I want you to do for the rest of your week this week is I want you to begin to observe the mind and start bringing awareness to what survival patterns your ego has created to keep you staying safe, to keep you in the harbor, to keep you only sailing in fair weather. And once you create that awareness, you've already set the wheels in motion for change.